Hi, friends. Good afternoon. It is 1:04 p.m. in New York City. I am here, and I hope you will be joining me live. Some of the friends, they come on to watch the live stream. They watch it as a recording later, and I appreciate all of you, no matter when you're joining, whether you're joining me live or you're going to be joining me in the future. Welcome. Happy to have you here. It is Tuesday right now. It is Tuesday, December 9th, 2025. It is almost unbelievable. We are 22 days away from a new year. I'm trying to read all the books. I'm trying to read all the books. My Goodreads reminder says I am 18 books behind schedule. If I want to meet my reading goals, I need to catch up with 18 books and then read the other books that I need. So right now I am on my 95th book, I think, for the year. And my goal for 2025 was 120. That was the goal at the beginning of the year. Now, the year didn't quite go as I had expected. It definitely didn't go as I had hoped. There are some months where I read a lot. There are some months where I don't read much. And this was a year for the books. Or not a year for the books, pun intended. I didn't read too much. There were months where I didn't read. And so I'm a little bit behind my reading goal. And it's fine. If I meet it, that's okay. I'm not going to change it. My goal on Goodreads is 120 books for the year. That was the goal that I put in my reading journal. I think officially that was my goal, but I think personally I was hoping to read even more. But this is my reading journal. And so right here, this one right here, 120 books was my goal for 2025. So right now I am 25 books away from meeting it. I don't think I'm going to meet it unless I read like some really short books. Or what I am actually doing is I'm doing some print slash audiobook combination or um, double media in tandem, however you say it. Listening to audio and reading along with the text for some of the books. And so I finished a book. I actually finished two books since the last time we spoke, and I'm in the middle of a third. I know, right? So I finished this book that I talked about in my Vlogmas video yesterday. I finished Dominoes by Phoebe McIntosh. The publishers had sent this to me when it was first released in 2023. And I'd started reading it, but I didn't get very far because I just didn't. There are sections in this book where the author there are sections in this book where it feels like it's a young woman trying to figure out life. And I think no matter where we are in life, we're still trying to figure out life because I don't think you completely know everything that you need to know about where you are and what you want to do. But when we meet this character, she's in her late 20s and she is in this period of her life where she has a best friend and they've known each other all throughout their lives and they now work together and they're very close. And it is about how she sees herself as her friend, as the friend of, let's use names. So our main character is Layla. Her best friend is Sarah. Sarah, like short for Serafina, not Sarah as in Sarah. It's Sera. So Layla and Sarah are best friends, and Layla and Sarah, no matter that they have very similar backgrounds, they present to the world very different. Our main character, Layla, is biracial, kind of white passing, and maybe if you don't know too much about her, you will think that she is white. I don't think she goes out of her way to tell you that I don't think she would pretend to be white if she was introducing herself. But people maybe looking at her for the first time think of her as white. Her best friend is not. Um, her best friend is a black woman. A black woman. She is Black British. The story is happening in England, and So they're two women with similar or with a shared background, even though Layla's background is a little bit more mixed. They're both women who have African background, and yet they present very differently to the world. And so in the beginning of the book, we're kind of focusing on just what Layla sees of herself, what she sees of the world, how she views herself. And race is not a big thing. So she meets this man and they start this relationship. And it's not until sometime later that we realize that the man that she is seeing is a white man. And it shouldn't matter, right? Not that it should matter. But this interracial relationship becomes the focus of the rest of the book. And her relationship with her friend becomes more of a challenge than than a help, because her friend now becomes almost the antagonist in her life, prompting her to think about certain things that Layla doesn't seem to want to think too much about, things that she's not bothered by, but Sarah is. And so her friend, who starts off being her biggest champion and supporter, now becomes the antagonist in this relationship, pushing Layla to ask and seek answers to these very difficult questions about the connection between Layla and her fiance, because they do have this shared background of their ancestors being in Jamaica. And the book becomes something more than just the characters. So while these characters in here they're not really likable, the story is about more than just the characters. It becomes this big discussion of history and the present, and how we reconcile the history of our ancestors, the people who we are descended from, whether or not what of our history we are using to navigate our present circumstances. Um, that really becomes the focus of the story, even though even though we might not like the characters. So it's a really interesting book that that this author gives us, because it is about thinking about the story separate from who the characters are. Because you may have feelings about what the character does to fix her personal situation, and that may be very different from how you think about this topic as a whole. So it talks about interracial relationship. It talks about politics, racial politics. Um, the book is happening in the 2020s, and so there is mention of like the pandemic and how people were on lockdown and what people did because of lockdown, and also the very big protest that erupted while we were still on pandemic procedures or pandemic policy, the very big protest about George Floyd and George Floyd's murder, and how it impacts conversations that these characters are having, other people who are um, other people who had been subject to undue violence from law enforcement. And so like I'm saying, it talks about some really big racial topics, and it becomes more than just about these characters who you may or may not like, who you may or may not consider to be strong enough to carry the story. But Dominoes is about more than just these characters. And so at the end, I gave it a 4-star rating. I gave it a 4-star rating because, like I said, I think that the story is bigger than my personal relation to the characters. And even if I didn't love the main character or her friend or her fiance, I thought the story was well written. So that's a little bit of a complicated reaction. I talked a little bit about it yesterday in in a recommendation video where I shared 3 books on a theme of racial politics, and that was one of them. So I would recommend that you read that book. It came out in 2023. There is an audio version which I listened to on from my library app, and it's read by the author. And I would recommend, if you have access to the print book, to read the print book, because the author, she reads it. I mean, it's her story. She reads it well, but I think I prefer to read this physically. I listened to it because I was also doing other things while I was listening. So there were times when I wasn't following along so much in the print book, and I would go back. But I found that when I would return to the print book, that sometimes I would flip back and go back to places that I had already listened to and just read them again visually. So if I had to recommend one over the other, I'd recommend that you read the print if you can. So yeah, finish that. Finish that. That was book number 94. I think that was book number 94 for me. No, that was book number 93. So book number 94 is this book that I found in the library yesterday. I went to the library to pick up a hold, like I told you. And I just saw this and I said, oh, nature writing. I haven't read too much nature books this year. And since I got into nature writing, I have wanted to read like a certain amount of nature books each month. And I don't have a specific number. It's just, I said to myself, I wanted to read more nature writing. And this year, I haven't read a lot of nature writing because in previous years, some of the nature books that I would read would have been assigned to me because of the BookTube Prize. And this year, there weren't many nature books in the BookTube Prize. And if there were, none of them were assigned to me as when I was judging. And then I also had planned to follow along with the Book Naturalist Book Club recommendations and their book list. And I read a couple of books that they read this year, even if I didn't read them at the same time that the book club was reading them. But just in general, I didn't read all of the books on the Book Naturalist Book Club list. And so I just feel like I was lacking in nature writing. So I wanted to read something, especially now. It's pretty cold. It's actually really cold in New York today and yesterday and all the last week. So I'm not spending as much time outdoors as I would like to. Like I'm not feel sometimes it's just so cold I don't feel like going for like really long walks. I'll go for a medium walk, but not too much. Um, Also because I was sick, still have to keep myself from not being just like too cold and too exposed. But say all of that to say I haven't been outside as much as I like enjoying the outdoors sometimes. So I wanted to live vicariously through a book that explored nature. And so I found this in the library. Thought the cover was pretty cool. It is Close to Home: The Wonders of Nature Just Outside Your Door by Thor Hansen. And I'll tell you right now that I am not sure that the rating that I gave it is warranted. Here's what the book is about. Thor Hansen is a conservation biologist. That's the author right there. Um, he lives with his wife and son on an island in Washington State. Um, he's an award-winning writer. It says here that he is a Guggenheim Fellow and an author of award-winning books. And in this book, the introduction says that you don't have to leave home to have adventures in the natural world. Um, Let me see. Okay. The book is really interesting. It presents some really interesting facts and compiles writings from lots of different sources that make for a really great exploration of the theme. Explore where you are and it will make you appreciate the wider world even more. And I think that's a lesson that I myself need to learn, and one that I think other people could also appreciate. So, as a conservation biologist, he this author has traveled the world. I don't know the extent of his travels. I know he's gone to certain places. I know he's gone to some places that he's mentioned here. I don't know where else he's gone. So maybe saying that he travels the world, maybe that may not be quite correct, but forgive me for saying so. What I mean to say is he has traveled extensively, and he has done studies of natural habitats, both close to home, I'm assuming, as well as far away. In the introduction, he mentions a time when he was working in Uganda, and he talks about a mountain gorilla project that he was working in or on in the mid 1990s in Uganda's Bwindi Impenetrable National Park. And something that happened there, I'll mention later. So he has gone to different places and he studied, but he said he got this contract to write the book. So he got the money for the book, or the contract for the book, before the book was a book. So he says in the beginning, he says, it began with a bird and a window. The bird was a hermit thrush, and the window was the one that occupies the northern wall of my office shack. So he saw this bird outside, and he went to go, explore what had happened to the bird. And then he realized that he was in his office writing about biology while biology was being lived right outside of his window. And so I'm guessing maybe he had another idea for a book, and he changed to write this one, because in here he is now proposing the idea that sometimes if we just explored the spaces around us, we could, one, see things that are we could learn how to see things that we wouldn't normally pay attention to, that when we explore we find things that just wouldn't be there, to be explored if we didn't actually start exploring, but that it also changes our appreciation of the wider world. And so maybe habits or practices that we would have that would be destructive, we would change because we have a better understanding of our place in the whole system. And so we'd be better conservationists, we'd be better just like stewards of our natural habitat. And also that maybe we would do things that would change, like intentionally do things that would change the world for the better. Um, and I like that. I really like that story. I like that premise. I like that thesis. And I think he explores that pretty fully, each one of those tenets: seeing, exploring, and what's the third one? Seeing, exploring, and restoring, I think. However, what I find to be a glaring omission is that the author doesn't seem to make note of the native people who have built a wealth of information about this actual land, about this actual space. So I mentioned that he was working on this project in Uganda. And while he was there, he said in the mid 1990s, another student came to observe some bees. And the student was, I'm assuming, a student from someplace outside of Uganda. I don't know where, if it was American, European, I don't know. But he said a master's student came to study some bees that were in this park in Uganda, and he couldn't make headway of how to find the bees. Like, he could see them, but he couldn't see them in their natural hive or nest. So he didn't know like how to move his study forward. So he retained the services of an indigenous man, a Batwa man, who the Batwa are native, like a hunter-gatherer native people, native to the forest that was probably the park. Because when you create a wildlife sanctuary, there was probably just like wild space there, and so now it's been cordoned off to become this park. But the people who used to live there are still maybe close by. So this master's student, he retained the services of a native man to help him locate the nests for these bees. And here is how he said it happened. The the man, the native man and the student, they they went, he said the mat okay, let me read it. The Batwa man took the student to a small clearing in the forest where they settled down beside the flowers and they waited. And they waited. And then the student says, "What am I even paying this guy for?" And then the bees showed up. The bees, did what the bees do on the flowers and then moved away, flew off. Then they waited some more and another bee came, or the same bee came and did what the bees do with the flowers and then moved away. And they watched that process several times. And then he says the Batwa man, stood up, walked briskly into the forest for a short distance before stopping, looking around, and pointing to a hole in an old stump where the bees were busily going in and out. So he just pointed out the nest. And the the student learned how it was that this native man had located the bee habitat. He knew the bee, number one. When I guess the student had approached him looking for a guide, he was able to explain this bee that he was looking for. And so this native man, he knew the bee, and so he knew what flowers would attract the bee. So that's why they went to this clearing, so that they could wait for the bees, because the native man knows what the bee is looking for. And by knowing how fast bees fly, watching to see what direction they go in, and also kind of what kinds of spaces they would inhabit looking for a nest, it was probably easy for him to locate the specific stump where these bees were hiding, because he knows how fast the bees fly by watching to see how long it takes the bee to make a trip. If it's the same bee that's coming back and forth, you can gauge how far away from the flower the bee nest or beehive would be. And so something that seems pretty simple when you have learned it may not be something that most of us can figure out just by ourselves, at least not at the first few attempts. But there are native people who have studied this land that we occupy. So this place that I call my backyard, this place that I call home now, this soil, this land, these resources have been studied by people who lived here for generations before me. And so, wanting to build on the idea of um, what we call it, like cumulative learning, using what I have, using the wisdom acquired by someone else who has studied this thing, and incorporating it into my own research, present day, present time, present circumstances, will make for a more comprehensive study. But while the author seems to extend this study to something that happened in Uganda 30 plus years ago, it doesn't seem to have that same kind of involvement here on American soil. And so the author is living in Washington State, and there's absolutely no mention of the native people who occupied Washington State. He talks about the birds and the flowers and the insects and the mammals that are in the wild spaces close to his home. He talks about moving around the country and other animals that have resurfaced based on changes in how we use the world or how we use a specific space, like talking about the impact on natural habitat of pandemic. So during the months when most of the world was on lockdown, and a lot of the industry that had been booming prior to that had slowed down, how some of the natural systems had kind of shifted back to what they used to be, like when there weren't a lot of ships plying the routes that are the usual trade routes, how some of the oceanic life had just kind of return to what they used to do and how they used to behave before they had to compete with all the noise and all the wave energy and so on. And I just thought that for a book that seems to be so comprehensive, like he includes a lot of literary, like lessons that you could learn from literary writers, from other scientific writers, other ecologists, biologists, physicists, scientists of lots of different ilks. For a book that seems to be so comprehensive, like this, like there's this glaring omission, and I'm not sure why. I've never read anything else about this. I've never read anything else before about, I can't speak. I haven't read anything from this author before this one. So I don't want to say that it was an intentional omission. I also have not yet read the notes. And in the beginning of the book, the author asked us to read the notes, because he couldn't include everything in the book. Although the notes are not that much, it's not very long. Some of these could have probably been added to the book. It may have made the book seem a little longer. Might not have read as well, but yeah. I don't know. I don't know why there's no mention of Native people in this book. Why there's no mention of the lessons that we have learned and could learn more about this space if we use the wealth of information that Native peoples have contributed. I don't know why, but I didn't see it in here. And I read and I listened. So I like the book, but with a caveat. There were a couple of things in here that just made me think about a lot of other things. Like there were a lot of quotes, a lot of literary quotes that I thought were just so interesting, and those were profound on their own. The opening map of the author's yard, I like that. His little tent, his little setup, his little animals that are in the space close to where he lives. Backyard biology. The first quote that is at the beginning of the introduction is a quote from Shakespeare, who said, "Who then persuaded you to stay at home?" That's from Henry IV, Part 2. And there are lots of illustrations in the book, photographs and illustrations. This is a photograph of the author. This is from that time in the 1990s in Uganda that I shared. And lots of little sketches and drawings. This is the bee. Photographs. This is a picture that I remember seeing during my childhood. This is from Illustrated London News, 1887, and it is about Darwin. Though famous for his travels in the Galapagos Islands, Charles Darwin spent most of his long career at home, conducting experiments in the yard and taking daily rambles on a path he dubbed the Sand Walk. It's probably safe to say that if backyard observations helped Charles Darwin to better understand evolution, then they probably have a lot to teach all of us. Yeah. There was a lot in here that I thought was pretty inspiring. Makes me want to go take some nature walks with my daughter. So I finished that book and enjoyed it, except for the thing that I said I thought could have been included and done maybe a little bit better. So those are the two books that I have finished since we last spoke. I am now currently reading this one, No Fond Return of Love by Barbara Pym. This is going to check a few boxes for me. One, it's one of the titles that I had put on my 10 Before the End challenge. And the reason for that was because I wanted to advance a few of the challenges that I had given myself this year. So one of the things that I have identified as a project is that I want to read all the works from these three female authors, Muriel Spark, Barbara Pym, and Toni Morrison. So far in the 10 Before the End Challenge, I took a book from all three of those authors. And I read Muriel Sparks' The Bachelors, and I finished that. That was great. Then I read Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, which was great. And now I'm reading a Barbara Pym. I have another Barbara Pym scheduled to buddy read with my friends, but just in case we don't get to that before the end of the year, I wanted to read something else. So my experience with this is going really interestingly. Is that a word? So I don't know how, but it's like I've just discovered e-audio. So I went on my library website, New York Public Library website, which allows me to get access to some e-audio. And sometimes I can, and sometimes there's a very long hold list or a waiting list. So, and some of the books that I want to read, I don't have an e-audio. They don't have an e-audio available, but there is a bind up. It's not even a bind. It's a collection. There's a collection of some of Barbara Pym's novels on the website. So I downloaded it and I started listening, and then I realized that it is, like I said, a collection of several of her books, but they're presented as plays. So I think they were like radio broadcasts. So I opened up the book. It took me a while to find it because it's not it's not labeled properly. Like it tells you chapter 20, chapter 40, but it doesn't say what chapter. It doesn't say when this book starts because there are several books in the list. I wish I could speak. I'm having difficulty explaining myself. So there are about 5 or 6 novels, and I'm not even sure how many of them. This is one of them. So anyway, I found the chapter in a long list of 40 something chapters where this book started. And I'm looking for it to say chapter 1 and for it to start reading here. It doesn't do that. It's because the book starts with narrative prose. All of this was just what you were to understand from listening to music. And then the presentation, because it's a play, doesn't start until the first time we have conversation or spoken aloud thought. Um, so I like my eyes are like glancing around the page, and I'm like, and she says, I'm Dulcie Mainwaring. And I was like, but that didn't, what happened to the rest? So I'm realizing now that it's a radio broadcast that I was listening to. And so it only has the conversation, not the rest of the prose, which I'm still finding to be a good accompaniment because what I have discovered is that I read visually a lot faster than I listen. When I'm listening to the book, it sounds like if I put it on like 2 or 2.5 speed, it's way too fast. But that's actually the speed that I read visually at. So if I put it back down to like 1.5 speed, I can be reading with the print faster in the book. So I'm reading everything. I'm reading all the prose, all the descriptions, all the internal ruminations. And by the time I get to the conversational part of the book that I'm now going to hear on the audio, I'm there as well. So it's a really weird experience of listening to this book and I'm sorry, reading this book and listening to the audio. Yeah, it's a really weird combination, but it's working. It's working for me so far. I'm at page 60. I don't know if I'll continue with that. So I'll continue with that later. So that's what's been going on over here with reading. That's what's been going on over here with reading. I finished a couple of books. I didn't sleep too much. I haven't really slept, but I've been reading. Sometimes just gotta balance it out. So let me know if you've been reading, what you've been enjoying, and what you have coming up next. Goodreads says I'm 18 books behind my schedule, and that if I want to meet my reading goals, I got to finish 25 books before the end of the month. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen unless I read some really short books. So, like, maybe I'll read my daughter's little books one right here. I can read it right now. When one day we come on, we'll read. It was the night before Christmas. Patrice had given me this, I think. This is an illustrated, beautifully illustrated copy of It Was the Night Before Christmas. And so we have it on display, and I will read it with my daughter. Um, we'll read it in bed, maybe starting a few nights from now. But yeah, I'm going to be counting some of these shorter books if I want to meet my reading goal. So, in case you didn't watch my video last week, where I shared some short books that you could read to advance your reading goal, I am definitely going to be doing that as well as listening to some audio from the library. My library card allows me to access three audiobooks at a time. I have another Toni Morrison that I had downloaded. There was a book that I had started from her, and I know I have to restart it because it's been a while. I started it earlier in the year. It was Love by Toni Morrison. I think it's up there. But maybe I'll listen to that one night. And I'm gonna keep plodding along and see if I can meet this goal. It's not a big deal to me if I don't meet it, but since I did put it on my list, and it's one of the few like targets that I haven't really met. These were not possible to complete the backlist and classics TBR. That was never going to happen, and to complete all the works from these three authors, that was never going to happen. Those were not real goals. I was supposed to read 7 Booker winners, and that didn't happen. Okay, so maybe it's not such a bad thing if I don't meet any of these goals, because I guess I wasn't in line to meet any of them. 2025 reading was a bust. I should say that. I've read 95 books. Did I say 95 or 94? I think 94 books. This is my 95th. There's nothing to sneeze at. If I change my goal to 100 books for the year, I will meet it as long as I finish my 10 before the end challenge, because right now I am halfway. And if I read the 5 more that I haven't yet read or started, that alone would put me at 100 books. And 100 books for the year is nothing to sneeze at. It's only in recent years that I have been able to meet that number. And so to get to 120 is really just bonus. It's really just bonus. We'll see if it happens. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. So I am going to have to head out soon because I have some errands to run before I have to pick up my daughter from school. And I just really enjoyed. I appreciate you being here, and I enjoy chatting with you. We didn't get a lot of comments today to respond to, but I told you yesterday I wanted to do this. The Goodreads Choice Awards. I wanted to talk about the books that were named. Let's just do that, and then we have to go. A couple of these books I wanted to read, see if I can still get a copy of this from the library. The books that were the most popular books this year. Most popular books from the Goodreads Reading Challenge. Goodreads Choice Awards. Okay. The winners for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I had voted in the second round. I voted for books that I hadn't read, but I had heard about. So the best book, the Goodreads Choice winner for fiction, is My Friends by Frederick Backman. I haven't read it. I've only read a couple of these books. The historical fiction winner is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. The mystery and thriller is Not Quite Dead Yet by Holly Jackson, which I have read, and I gave that a 4-star rating. And I could see where it could be a 5. Like, it was a really unique story. I've never read a book like that before. So yeah, maybe it deserves a 5-star. I gave it a 4, and maybe I should revisit that. But I don't read a ton of mystery thrillers. I don't think I am, maybe necessarily the person to say that it wasn't perfect. But yeah, that's the winner for the mystery and thriller section genre. Romance, Emily Henry won for Great Big Beautiful Life. And I haven't yet read it, but I'm going to see if I can get a copy. It would be great to read that before the end of the year. The romantasy winner was Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. The fantasy winner is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. And the science fiction winner is Eileen Rawle. The Compound? Is that how her name is pronounced? The Compound by Eileen Rawle. Horror, Grady Hendrix, Witchcraft for Wayward Girls is the winner in that category. The debut novel winner is Alchemized by Sen-Lin Yu, which I have a copy of. And it's just such a big book that I know I won't be able to read it before the end of the year, but I'm going to prioritize it in 2026. Alchemized. The top audiobook was Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. The YA fantasy and sci-fi winner is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. And the winning YA fiction is Fake Skating by Lynn Painter. The top nonfiction read is Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green, The History and Persistence of Our Deadliest Infection. And the winning memoir is The House of My Mother by Shari Frank. The winner for his history and biography is How to Kill a Witch, The Patriarchy's Guide to Silencing Women by Zoe Venditozzi and Claire Mitchell. So I haven't read most of these. Of all of the books that are there, I've only read one, and that's the mystery and thriller. There's no literary fiction category, which is what I read most of. I do read some romance. I read some historical fiction. I read a lot of fiction, but I didn't read any of those winners. So I'm going to pick a couple of these and see if I can get copies of them from my library and maybe have them added to my reading list before the end of the year. Alchemized, I know I have a copy. The publishers had gifted it to me, and I'll try to get to that early in 2026. But the romance, the fiction, and the historical fiction, for sure, I'd like to check those out. And the memoir, The House of My Mother by Shari Frank, A Daughter's Quest for Freedom. I'm going to add that to my TBR as well. I'm not sure who the author, what the author's life has been about. I'm not sure about that story, but I'm going to add it. I'm going to see which of these I can get before the end of the year and just let you know. So that's how we're going to wrap this up today. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your company. I will be back hopefully tomorrow with another Lunchtime Live. And I'm working on a Vlogmas video for later today. So I hope you'll join me for that. Today's video may not have a book recommendation. It may just be a book list. But I still have to finish editing it, so I'll let you know. So maybe I'll just have one recommendation instead of like a group. So thank you so much for spending some time with me today. If you are watching in the future, I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe you put it on as a background and you were reading. Let me know what you were reading. Tomorrow's video, maybe we'll do some reading sprints because like I said, I'm trying to read all the books, So let me know what you've been doing, what you've been up to, how your Christmas preparations are looking up, and I'll see you in the next video. Until we come back, happy reading. Bye.